2018 City Planning Commission meeting. We will begin with a roll call. Commissioner Ackerman.
Here.
Commissioner Briggs.
Here.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Here.
Commissioner Mills.
Here.
Commissioner Milstein here. Commissioner Sauvé.
Here.
Commissioner Trudeau.
Here.
Commissioner Weatherby.
Here.
Commissioner Woods. We have a quorum. Moving on to introductions. Do we have any introductions this evening?
No.
Great. Moving on to approval agenda. Do you have a commissioner that will move the agenda? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Trudeau. Any discussion on the agenda? All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? All right, moving on to minutes of previous meetings. Before us this evening, we have the June 19th, August 8th, and September 5th meeting minutes. We will take them up all three together unless someone objects. Do I have any discussion? All moved by Commissioner Ackerman, seconded by Commissioner Weatherby. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? They're approved. Moving on, reports from City Administration, City Council, Planning Manager, Planning Commission officers, and committees, written communications, and petitions. We'll first begin with Commissioner Ackerman for our report from City Council.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. While City Council was here until 1 a.m. last night, very little by way of planning and building policy. One item of note is that starting in 1994, the city established a treaty per se with the surrounding townships, setting our ultimate growth boundary, and deciding that in years forward that we would begin to annex properties within that growth boundary. Today there are a number of what we call township islands, which are pieces of land, parcels of land that are technically township but reside entirely or entirely surrounded by city land. Starting in 2011, the council at the time directed city staff to begin a process of strategically annexing those township islands. Right now, we are in the midst of the second round of large annexations. It's a series of about 85 different petitions or parcels to be annexed into the city. City Council moved to postpone as there are pretty dramatic capital costs associated with tapping into the city's infrastructure system, and we want to better understand what the impacts to those future residents will be. We're talking about 5-6 figure sums of money. So trying to do this as delicately as possible.
Great. Thank you. Planning Manager.
Nothing to report at this time.
Great. And I see a question from Commissioner Weatherby.
I did have a comment from ZBA.
Great. That's our next item, Planning Commission officers and committees.
I don't have the agenda.
Commissioner Weatherby.
I just wanted to comment on 1420 South Maple Road, which we approved in June or July, I think. There were two variances requested. One was the maximum front setback for a building is 40 feet from their frontage, but they have that on I-94, so they requested a larger setback of 118 feet, and that was approved. And the other one was a 31-foot driveway, which is wider than what is the norm, but there had been a request for them to line it up with Pauline, even though it's a private road. They wanted it to match up with the width of Pauline, so that was also approved. So.
Great, thank you. Any other Planning Commission officer or committee reports? Commissioner Mills.
The ORC met last Tuesday night. It was an extremely well-attended ORC meeting. We had a number of things on our agenda, but we ended up only talking about food trucks, mobile food trucks. I would expect that that's going to be coming back to us. There was a draft that we looked at. We made a number of recommendations, and then I think it's going to come to a working session. And I can't remember if it's October or I don't think we established whether it was going to be at the October working session, which would be next week, or the one in November. But that's moving forward.
Great, thank you. Commissioner Trudeau.
Thank you. So Transportation Commission did endorse an update to the city's traffic calming process, which went to council last night, and I will hand it off to Councilmember Ackerman to update us on what happened last night.
Thanks. I was disappointed that City Council, it's hard to say voted down. A majority voted for it, but it didn't achieve 6 votes because of sparse attendance last night. So it was a 5-4 decision that ended up, the motion failed. This update to the traffic calming program, in my mind, having worked on it through the task force commission and to City Council and being proud of the product, in my mind would have lowered the bar of entry for neighborhoods to petition the local government to get improved safety infrastructure in their neighborhoods. It's something that people have been asking for a long time because the majority of petitions submitted by neighbors are actually rejected by the city because they don't reach our criteria or our minimum threshold for what we consider as a danger. So this was a means to make it easier for neighbors to petition to have better infrastructure and safer neighborhoods. Because of some, I think because of some complications and lack of citizen engagement with other similar types of programs, but not this program in particular, some members of council felt as though this update to this particular program would lack enough community engagement in the process to warrant moving forward. Given that it is a citizen-initiated process, I think the threshold of community engagement is already pretty high. The neighbors are engaging each other, and there are multiple steps of community engagement involved in the process. It's my intention to quickly have Transportation Commission discuss it again, perhaps update and tweak it and bring it back to council. But for those interested in pedestrian and cyclist safety, particularly in their neighborhoods, maybe something worth contacting City Council about.
Thank you. Any other planning commission officers or committee that'd like to report? All right, moving on to written communications. In our packet, we do have some written communications, so please take a look at that. Moving on to audience participation. Is there anyone in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission regarding an item that is not on the agenda this evening? We will be discussing 132 Hill Street shortly, but is there anyone who would like to address an item that is not currently on our agenda? Seeing no one, we will move on to public hearings scheduled for our next business meeting. Our next business meeting will be on Tuesday, October 16th at 7 o'clock right here. We will be hearing the following petitions. 1750 Plymouth Road special exemption use with site plan for City Planning Commission approval. 715 Heather Way annexation and zoning for City Council approval. Signature Club parking lot improvements, landscape modification for City Planning Commission approval. And 1505 White Street alley vacation. So that will be at our next meeting. Moving on to regular business. So this evening, we're going to do it a little bit differently. We will hear from the petitioner and the petitioner's team. They'll have 10 minutes to present their petition before the Planning Commission. After that, we'll hear from our planning staff, Mr. Chang, who will go through his report, and then we will go to public comment, a public hearing, and then we'll go into discussion and ultimately a vote. So buckle up. So moving on to number 9, regular business, 132 Hill Street multifamily residential site plan for City Council approval.
Hello, I'm Kathy Kyneth with Macon Engineering, and I'm here tonight with David Lewis from Lewis Greenspoon Architects, and we're representing Mr. Bob Miller with Miller Building, who is the petitioner, developer, and owner of the property at 132 Hill Street. So I will try to not mess this up. The first slide is just an overview aerial showing the 132 Hill site property. As you can see, it's surrounded by R4C. It is R4C. Most of the area is used for rental property. It is on Hill Street, just east of Main Street and west of the railroad tracks. This is the city zoning map. As you can see, it's surrounded by R4C. And there is a small area on the southeast side of the property that touches a piece of property that's zoned commercial. This is a close-up of the site from an aerial view. You can see the existing residence. On either side, there are also homes, similar homes to it. I'd also like to point out the curb cuts locations, because this is something that we wanted to talk to you about tonight. There's an existing curb cut on the east property line, and there are 2 curb cuts on the west property line, one that serves the adjacent house and one that serves this parcel, but they're right next to each other. This is a picture of the existing house from the front. And this is a picture of the existing house, also from the front, but from the east side. And this is a picture of the rear of the house. You can see the house is in extremely poor condition. It hasn't been maintained for a long time. Obviously, the roof is caving in, and there are problems with the foundation and the structural integrity of the existing building. This is 126 Hill, which is directly west of the property. And this is 140 Hill, which is directly east of the property. And this is the property that we are proposing to share a driveway with along what would be their west property line and our east property line. This is the 143 Hill project, which is directly across the street. It was also developed by Miller Building Company, and it was just recently finished this summer. And this is the other property that is across the street at 133 Hill Street. This property was developed some time ago. I'm not quite sure how long ago it was, but you can notice that it has the 3-story home, a large driveway along the property line. And we're moving into the site plan. So what we're proposing is a 5-unit building, multifamily residential. It is zoned R4C. The lot is about 66 feet wide and 173 or 4 feet in length. So it's a long, narrow piece of property. This is the site plan. The dimensional site plan. So you can see the shared driveway that we were talking about. We're proposing to get rid of the curb cut that's on the west property line and share a driveway with the 140 Hill parcel that would lead around to the back where the parking would be. We're proposing to maintain the conflicting land use buffers along the entire length of the west property line and the southerly property line, and a portion of the east property line, except for where the shared driveway would be located. And that does require us to obtain a variance to not have to install that conflicting land use buffer along that property line. This is a more detailed landscaping plan if you're interested in the plant materials. And then this is the stormwater management plan. The site is not required to do full detention. It is required to store the first flush. There's about 7,500 square feet of impervious area, and that area includes that entire length of that shared driveway. So we will be providing first flush storage, and that's being achieved by a series of rain gardens located along the property. There's one in the southeast corner. There's a long rain garden that spans along the west property line, and then there's another rain garden in the front yard that captures all of that driveway water that would be draining into it. And this is just a rendering of the site plan. And then I will let David talk about the building a little bit for you.
Good evening. My name is David Lewis. I'm with Lewis Greenspan Architects. We are the designers of the building. These are the 4 elevations of the building. The upper right corner is the front facade facing Hill Street. It's a three-story building with a finished basement. It complies with the height requirements of zoning and all the setbacks required. And at the very top of this image is a kind of a view of the whole street showing the other properties on the block. And as you can see, the scale of this building is pretty comparable to what's there currently. And as far as the style of the proposed building, we're shooting for something contemporary, yet not anything too, unusual. And there'll be a mix of materials for the exterior finish, and lots of big windows for the tenants to get lots of, oh, and I forgot we had that. Thank you for reminding me. And then here is a rendering of the building. Viewing the front north elevation and the side east elevation and the shared driveway. You can see that there. I think that's about it for the architecture.
I sort of forgot to mention the parking. We are providing 8 parking spaces in the rear. We're also providing bike parking. We were required to only provide 1 Class A parking space. We provided 7 Class A and 2 Class C spaces, which were shown on the site plan. If you want me to go back to those, I can. Other than that,
I meant to just fill in a little bit more for the building. So there are 5 units, as Kathy mentioned. 4 of the units are 6 bedrooms, and the center unit is 4 bedrooms. And these units are all kind of organized vertically, so no one has any neighbors above them or below them. Every unit goes from the basement up to the roof. Did we lose? We lost a monitor. Oh, there it is. That's it.
so that's pretty much, to summarize, that's our presentation, and we're here to answer any questions that you would have tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll now move on to the staff report.
Yeah, I
Mr.
think Mrs. Kine covered it thoroughly. I would just add a couple of things. This project may be phased. It all depends on the upgrade of the water main in the street. It's proposed to be upgraded in 2019, but again, I can't predict the future, so if there is a delay, they may phase the project, which they showed on the site plan. They also had additional setbacks due to the length of the building, which they did meet. And as far as the variance from the conflicting land use buffer, there is support from the city's urban forester as this moves forward to the Zoning Board of Appeals. And I'm available for any other questions you may have.
Thank you. At this time, we'll open up the public hearing. Anyone who wishes to address the Planning Commission, you may do so at this time. If you'd like to speak, please approach the podium, state your name and address for the record, and you'll have 3 minutes to address the commission.
Hi, my name is Cindy Kwok. I am the property manager of 126 Hill, right next to the 132 Hill. My question, and I want some clarifications about sharing the driveway, because I just heard from Ms. Kathy saying that the driveway you are proposing is to close the current, is to put it on the west side, which is 140 Hill. Is that correct? But in the report that I print out, it said that you want to close the west side and then you want to move it to the east side. So I want to have some clarification about exactly, instead of just say east side or west side, give me the number of the house, because, that's one thing, because I own 126 Hill Property Management. But then the fact is, because of this establishment, create a lot of house, a lot of people, and a lot of traffic. Either way, I want to make sure it's safe for the tenant in that neighborhood, because a lot of people moving in and with the bicycle and all that. And by itself, Hill Street is a very busy street. We just have to make sure it's a safety measure there. And please help me to understand, which driveway, we're talking about here. I'm getting confused, so.
Thank you.
Yep.
I'm sure one of the commissioners will ask that question during our discussion. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission in regards to this petition? Seeing no one, I'll close the public hearing and read the motion.
Excuse me.
If there's another person that'd like to address the, come on up. You still have 1 minute, 13 seconds to go. Go ahead.
My other concern is to make sure the new establishment, is built with the sufficient infrastructure around it, because the sewage systems and the water supply and also the flooding, because, I want to make sure that, with such a huge amount of people and the users, there is no, there's sufficient infrastructure around it. Okay, the electricities and the gas and all that, I know it's beyond the city control, but, we have to make sure everything is orchestrated properly. So there's nobody in this neighborhood is being jeopardized by this new establishment. Thank you.
Thank you. Is there anyone else in the audience who wishes to address the Planning Commission? All right, seeing no one, I will go ahead and read the motion. The Ann Arbor City Planning Commission hereby recommends that the mayor and city council approve the 132 Hill Street site plan, subject to approval from the Zoning Board of Appeals before issuance of any permits. Do you have a commissioner that will move? Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Gabrandel. We are in discussion. Commissioner Mills.
Thank you. I will just clarify on the curb cuts, if the petitioner wants to come up. I'm going to repeat to you what I think is going on, make sure. There are two curb cuts right now on the west side, which is by the 126.
Correct.
The curb cut that's associated with this the 126 would remain, but the other half would be closed, and it would be moved to widen the curb cut with 140. Is that right?
That's correct. If I can get to the right picture for you. So this picture shows the property line that we share with 126. So this is the curb cut that's on the 132 site. And then you can see there's a small little island here, and the curb cut for 126 is here. This will stay in place, and this driveway is the driveway that will be eliminated.
Thank you. Mm-hmm. And in terms of the safety of this, I don't know how much that was part of the consideration, but what I see right now is you won't have to back out of a driveway anymore, right? You could turn around, is that right?
Right, yes, it will be safer. We're eliminating a curb cut and improving one that's already there. And if you are out there, the curb cuts don't look like they really align with the parcels, and they certainly aren't the 4.5 feet off of the property line the way they're supposed to be. So this should improve it, and we'll have one access point for those two houses, which eliminates a curb cut, and it is kind of near the intersection of Adams and Hills, so I think this is a much safer layout than what's out there right now.
How will this intersect with the 140 property? Like, right now, it looks like people are parking in, it's driveway right now, is that right?
Right, so right now they park in the driveway, and he does have a garage back here. That garage will be demolished, and the driveway will come around, and then he will be able to drive down his driveway, and most likely the parking will move to the back of the building, and it will no longer be in the driveway and towards the front of the building.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm.
This is a question then for staff. Will that require that petitioner to come before or to talk to staff?
A little bit of history on the 140 site. They did come in, we're currently reviewing a site plan for this project, this proposal. They've withdrawn that, so I would have to, and he did indicate that they would be removing the garage, but if they're expanding it to a parking lot, which is more than 5 spaces, then he would have to come in for a site plan for Planning Commission. So I would have to wait and see what he's proposing to do at his site, since he's withdrawn his site plan.
Does having the shared driveway, technically, I guess you could just stay on your side of it. Does it require some kind of easement?
Yes, it does. This will be contingent upon an easement being recorded.
Perfect. Thank you. I do like the idea of not having to back out onto Hill. I think that, and so while we're not the body that would grant a variance, I think that from my perspective, that's a good safety measure in this particular case and having one fewer curb cut. I appreciate your question about what impact this is going to have on infrastructure nearby. And so we certainly heard that the water main is an issue and that that's going to limit how quickly this can be built. Do we know anything about the sewer system or what impact this has there?
I don't have any additional information on the sanitary or the storm, other than, at least for the storm, it is required to have first flush, so it's less than 10,000 square feet, which this one meets. As far as the sanitary, there were mitigation calculations that were accepted by our staff engineer.
Okay, so the sewer system seems to be okay. And in terms of the storm, it's because it's redeveloping this is a question, I guess, back for the engineer, but I'm imagining that right now it's not taking care of its own first flush?
There is absolutely no stormwater management on the site right now at all, so, right.
So
Everything runs off directly right into Hill Street right now.
So hopefully this will not just, it will improve the situation that's currently there rather than contribute additional to the problem.
It will, and we've also taken into account, there is off-site water that runs onto this parcel from the south, and we've accounted for that in our stormwater calculations as well.
Excellent, that's great to hear. I don't have any more questions.
Anyone else? Commissioner Gabrandel.
Continue on the storm system, I would appreciate that. So with the shared drive, are you counting the new drive from the neighbors to the east in your stormwater calculations?
Yes.
Okay, so that's great. I'm glad to see that. I'm obviously glad to see that we're doing some sort of treatment here. One thing I'm a little concerned about is that the catchment area for the rain garden that is dedicated to the drive is a tiny percentage of the area that is flowing to it, whereas the other rain gardens, especially the one on the west side, is much bigger, but it has a much smaller catchment area draining towards it. So obviously, Stormwater reviewed it, and Natural Features reviewed it. What I would have you look at twice is the vegetation that you have called out for that front rain garden, which I think will get drowned immediately in the amount of water that's going to it. So right now, you have a bunch of rudbeckia in there, and they're just going to rot. So I would suggest that you, if you were to pass tonight in between now and City Council, that you would look at something that would, it's going to get inundated all the time with 6 inches, with the smaller rain event, whereas the other ones will only fill up a few inches, because the catchment area is so, it's out of whack in terms of what's treating what. I get it that you only have so much room on the site, and so it's difficult to bridge underneath the sidewalk, and I totally get all that, but I would just ask you to review the species that you have there, because I think it's going to die.
Okay.
So that's what I would just have you look at between now and then.
Okay, we can look at that. I know the rain garden along the west property line, the long rain garden looks out of whack compared to the area it takes, but that's actually the area that's capturing
neighbors,
that
right.
off-site flow that's coming onto the
Right.
property, and it's also going to have roof drains going into it.
Yep.
And then that rain garden that's in the southeast corner actually takes the majority of the parking lot. So really, the one in the driveway, or the one in the front, is just capturing that driveway water. But we can certainly look at another
Yeah,
species.
it's
That's
still a
not
pretty
problem.
big area for the size that you were able to shoehorn in there. So I would, just because it's one of those things that people probably won't check 2 years from now, but then the rest of us have to live with the eyesore of it, is just focusing on things that will take the weather condition that it will likely have in typical rain
Okay.
events, so.
We can do that.
Commissioner Ackerman?
Just a question around process. This will, should it pass tonight, head to the ZBA. What else is outstanding in terms of review from engineering for their phasing before it heads to City Council?
No, it is ready for, if it gets approval from Planning Commission tonight on the ZBA, then it will be scheduled for the City Council. There is no outstanding items.
And the easement is already in place for the neighboring?
I don't believe it's recorded. Is it recorded? Okay, so if it's recorded, that's great.
So it's the ZBA and then City Council
That's
in
correct.
terms of process? Okay, thank you.
Commissioner Briggs?
describe the discrepancy between the gross lot area, the required 8,500 feet versus the 11,000 square feet that are proposed?
If you're referring to the comparison chart,
Yeah, thanks.
the 8,500 is the minimum lot size in the R4C district. And so what's existing is 11,499 square feet, so it meets the minimum lot size. And then they calculated out how many units they could get in there. I think it's based on like about 2,400 square feet, so that would allow them 5 units maximum on site.
Okay. So that just, all right, that helps clarify that for me.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So, let's see. So I did, adding on with the landscaping and rain garden and garden maintenance, that neighborhood is filling up with a lot of rain gardens that are sort of, you know, depressions with some junk and some not very nice plantings. So I would ask that this be, you know, maintained, and that the plants that go in are ones that have a shot at. So I appreciate that comment, because it is kind of becoming a thing when there's not, these lots are small, relatively small, so they don't meet the stormwater. So I think our sort of community answer is to make a rain garden, which sounds really nice, but a lot of them are not maintained as a garden. They're sort of just a depression where water goes. And so that is becoming somewhat of a problem around the area. So I just ask that, you know, I know you have multiple buildings there and multiple residences, so hopefully that'll be good, but I'm looking down the road that that's not always an ideal situation for kind of the look of the area. I did have some questions about, so I see the dumpsters. There's dumpsters in phase 1, then there's dumpsters in phase 2, but I didn't see those on the image that you had, where it looked like there probably should be dumpsters by the driveway. Is that, can you?
So the dumpsters, there's a set of dumpsters here,
Okay.
and then there's 2 more here, and there's 2 more towards the front of the building. We were trying to break them up, not just to accommodate the phasing, but also to accommodate the residents, and hoping that they will use them. And trying to make them convenient for them to use them, and also to get the carts out for curbside pickup.
Okay. I mean, I do appreciate that the residents most impacted by this garbage will be these residents, so, and that they're not kind of tucked in behind the houses on the other side. I think the driveway is a good idea. Those 2 drives right next to each other are problematic. I do have some concern about the easement. It is very common in that neighborhood to have shared driveways, more of a artifact of not having driveways when most of those houses were built, and so they just kind of picked a space in between. I know that because we own property that has had that, and it's great right now when these 2 owners have it. It can become problematic down the road. So the easement that's written is presumably kind of ingress, egress, parking, not going to be an issue during football games, kind of easement, I assume, that was tightly written so that it won't cause problems, because I know that has been problems on a lot of the shared driveways in the area. Question about bike hoops. So can you show where the bike hoops are?
So there are bike hoops down here, and then there's a bike locker up in this island. And then there's also spaces in each of the units. There's a space for a Class A bike as well.
Okay. And so there's nothing in the front?
No.
That is another concern for me, looking at the buildings that have been built recently in the area. An enormous number of bikes, Like if you look at 615 South Main, enormous number of bikes, but we've noticed that the bikes are right where the entrances are. And so for people to take the bike around, less likely than locking it up to whatever is closest to their entry. So if people are going in those front doors, you know, the people who live in that front area don't have a spot to put their bikes. And so it's just kind of a comment, because that's become sort of an issue, like bikes are locked all sorts of places because people don't want to walk around and lock their bike up. But I'm not going to hold this up for that, but just a comment that people seem to want the bikes right where they go in their places, and they will leave them there regardless. I did have a comment too about that this building matches what else is on the block. It matches what else is on the block that has been built in the last 5 to 10 years. And it does not at all, and I know that there were notes in the staff notes, that it does not at all match the original houses and the original buildings. And this will actually back up on a few very small houses from the turn of the century. And just, it's okay that it looks different, but it does not reflect the nature of the neighborhood. And to say that is a little, like, we built this and now it reflects the other one we built across the street. Well, yes. So, and then I just had a question, and I don't know, Chris, if you know, so we had talked about the crosswalk on Hill Street right there, and I know it was, we had discussed that for another, and I don't know if it was the building across Hill, but nothing's happened with that crosswalk, and I didn't know if that was something that we could follow up on.
I will follow up.
Because we keep adding it to different proposals, and I'm not sure anything's ever, and you know which crosswalk I mean, the one right on Hill closest to this. It's sort of mid-block, not quite Adams, but Hill and Green and...
And this was part of a previous proposal?
We have talked about it, and I don't know if anyone else remembers. We have talked about that in other proposals, but I don't know if we ever included it in. So that is something that I would like to have at least traffic take a look at, or, and I think that's what I have to say.
Commissioner Briggs.
So, I'm sort of struck when I look at this that it just seems to be jamming as much of a building as possible onto that property. Is kind of, is that a fair assessment, that it's sort of using as much space as it sort of can?
It is meeting all the setbacks, and in fact, it has an increased rear setback. It's a tight site because of the conflicting land use buffers that are also required around there. You could make the argument, could they have made it longer? It's possible, but I didn't do any type of alternatives analysis with this, but I'm sure they looked at, you know, what would fit on the site in the building envelope and constructed what was, you know, practical for them.
Right, because I'm looking at it, and as I went and visited the space, the existing building there before, there's currently a huge grassy yard that, you know, obviously the house itself is sort of falling down, but it has a fair amount of usable green space around it, and I'm trying to understand sort of the open space requirements. So it says, can you help me understand the comparison chart where we say minimum open space not applicable, and then?
Yeah, so there's a minimum open space requirement in the R4C district, which is 40%. You are allowed to use sidewalks, balconies, the conflicting land use buffer, green space, rain gardens, etc. So they've done the calculation, they meet the minimum of 46%. There's also an active open space where it has to be a minimum, I think, of 200 square feet, where you could, you know, I think somebody used an example of put a blanket out or be able to have a picnic, something along those lines. And it's 300 square feet per dwelling unit. And again, they've showed that it's 333 square feet, so there are areas for students to be able to have some active space.
So could you come up and show where that's usable space is?
So I think one of the things that might make it look a little skewed is that shared driveway. So the property line actually goes right down that shared driveway as well. So there are, this is open space, the rain garden ponds here, and then there's rain garden along this retaining wall here, but there's a large area here that's meant to be active open space. There's the patio in the rear, there's the porch in the front, and then there is the front yard. So when we do go through the calculations, it does show that there's 46% open space on the site. Like I said, I think it might be a little, when you look at this rendered drawing, it looks like a lot of pavement because we're also counting what's on the neighbor's property as well into that driveway.
So the rain garden is being counted within that required 40%?
It can be, yes.
I mean, but I mean in terms of that active space?
No, not for the active
Okay.
space. The active space cannot include the rain garden.
Okay. And then, I guess the question, without this easement in place to combine those driveways, would this work? I mean, if without the, I mean, basically what I'm seeing is that they're sort of maximizing the amount of space and creating as large a building as they sort of can conceivably with the parking. But it doesn't, that's requiring a variance from the ZBA to make that happen, right?
That's correct. I don't know about the dimensions on here. The minimum size of the driveway is between 18 and a maximum of 24 feet. Could they have shifted the building further to the west and actually got their own drive? I'll probably defer to the petitioner to see if it was possible.
So the property's only 66 feet wide. If we have to provide both of the landscape buffers along both property lines, that would take up 30 feet. And then a driveway would take up another 18. We would be left with 18 feet. And then assuming you need 3 to 5 feet along the side of a building to get entrances in and out of it, we would have, like a 12 to 15 foot wide building.
Well, I mean, there's a building there right now that's quite sizable, so it's working fine.
Right, but they don't have to provide the conflicting landscape buffer, and they don't have to meet the driveway requirement of 18 feet.
Okay, thank you. So we would require for any sort of new development here that a driveway and parking be.
That's correct, that a single or two family would allow a minimum of 10 feet, where a multifamily would be an 18-foot minimum driveway width.
Okay. And then, sorry, the other question, could you talk a little bit about the materials that are being used? Are they sort of similar to the building that most recently was built across the street, or what does that look like?
Yes, so the exterior finishes will be similar to what was done across the street. The idea, would be a combination of lap siding and using the Hardy product, which is a cementitious siding, and also the large panels as an additional way to put that up.
Okay, thanks.
Commissioner Sauvé.
Going back to the rear two units and the egress wells and the AC units and bike parking surrounding those. I see that the southwest unit is surrounded on two sides by the 2C bike parking and the AC unit. And then the only kind of exit out of that egress well would be towards the rain garden. And then the southwest unit, you're blocked by the porch, the AC units, and the refuse container area. So both of those, in terms of how those auxiliary pieces are sited, I feel like they're blocking egress, which is very concerning to me about how the if we're putting bedrooms in the basement, we've got egress wells and you've blocked them with bike parking. And the same with those refuse containers. My concern is them double stacked. The residents may not go, to the rear of that bin to throw the recycling in, properly close those gates. Those gates, if left opened or unhooked, open up into that driveway. So the rear arrangement of bike parking, AC units, and the garbage bins kind of concern me in their kind of compact location relative to the building and the driveway and egress safety. So I would make a recommendation that those need to be relocated to comply with life safety for the building. Especially if you've got 5 AC units rumbling right outside a bedroom window. So while it might comply with, setbacks to other housing, that's difficult for that resident, so. And then I ask them, where are those AC units placed? If it is single phase, we only have the refuse containers kind of noted if it's phase 1. So is there a plan for those units temporarily and then relocated if they are in the back? So I guess my question is, are there alternatives to relocating any of those pieces in the back of the site?
The one to the west, which is on the bottom, that's just a bike hoop. So that's not a locker that would impede someone from getting out of that window.
And I think it'd be easy to get out of the well to the, in the westward direction in that particular well. I think for the southeast well, we could easily relocate one AC unit to provide a path. I mean, the AC units I don't think are going to be, in reality, they're not as big as they're showing up on this drawing. So I think even if we arrange them this way, I think there'd still be space between them.
Is there appropriate daylight down to that bedroom when it's surrounded by fenced area for garbage and then AC units around the perimeter of it? For both of those, even with bikes not in a bike container, like that is an obstruction to the space. So daylighting and access and obstruction are still kind of concerning.
The daylighting that's required by code will be met.
Okay. And that's kind of where we're squeezed with setbacks and things for all of those things, you believe?
Yeah, it's definitely, we are, maxing out what is allowed to be done by code, by zoning code.
I think there was a follow-up question with regards to zoning, or not zoning, but phasing. If you end up phasing if you build the first phase, where are the AC units going? Since I'm assuming they're not going to be there, and the bike hoops and such. I believe that was.
Yep, so that's not noted for phase 1 location.
Right. I don't think we've necessarily decided where things will go exactly for phase 1. Because we still don't even know whether it's going to have to be phased depending on the city's schedule, the water main. So I don't know.
Thank you.
Thought about it.
Well, there's only one bike space that's required for the entire development. The phasing, there will be, the unit in the front will have a bike space in it that's required. So that requirement for bike parking is met even with the phasing. And along with the dumpsters too, that's that dumpster that's near the front of the property.
I mean, as far as for if it is phased in phase 1, there's going to be plenty of space for condenser units and trash because there'll be a lot of open land for only phase 1. So if your concern is, the exact location of those first 2 AC units, I'm not sure, but they'll be probably put close to the building in phase 1 and then move to where you see them now for phase 2.
Yeah, I think the concern primarily is those 5 units and those 6 refuse containers all bundled right at that corner. You know, even if that bike locker moves and you can line all 6 of those refuse containers up in a row, that would give, you know, residents access for better habits. I can just, the way those things are laid out don't make good habits, which makes people not use them, which makes them not put them away, you know, which
So,
causes friction
yeah.
on the site.
This layout was based on the experience that we've had at other sites
Okay.
with this. The property across the street that was just developed has the stack containers, and they do use them. It hasn't been a problem, and what I was trying to avoid is having one really long, not very pleasant-looking trash enclosure that would end up being like almost 20 feet long. This looked nicer, and I do think they will use it, yeah.
Okay.
It's, you know, they're just carts, they're not huge, they're, you know, 3 feet, so they can get their recycle to the back cart.
Commissioner Gibrandal.
Could we go to the, so I'm trying to figure out some materials here. Because on some of the site plans, I don't see where the sidewalk pavement is on the site plan that was in E-Track-It. But when I look at this rendering, go back to the perspective, that looks pretty different to me in terms of what's happening on the east side of the building. There's no refuse stuff, there's no bike locker. In fact, it's all green, including what I would love to see is a tree there in the parking lot. And that was one of the things I was considering asking, actually, because you don't have a conflicting land use buffer on that side, and you're asking for a variance. Wouldn't it be nice just to have a canopy tree there to be able to help shade the lot and things like that? But then, and I was thinking, oh, that could maybe work, but then not in the packet that we got up E-Track-It, but in the other rendered plan view plan, it looks like that whole little, what could be a landscape island is pavement there. So I was trying to understand where the person for the bike locker, where they come up to enter their bike into the bike locker, and where, like, where's your ramp? And like, where's your handicap ramp? How are people getting to the?
It's at grade with the parking lot.
Everything is at grade?
Yeah,
Okay, so there's no curb.
There's no stop.
Okay,
They will
because there was
just
also
be-
a curb in the perspective
Yeah.
too, which would have impeded.
And I would love to put a tree in that island. I had a tree in that
It's
island, and I would
under
love to
8
put one
feet.
there, but, you know, in the past, we've always been asked to provide more bicycle parking for the students, and that's where the locker fit, and that's where we could get in and out of it, and so that's why it's in that location.
So my question then is, where are they accessing the locker from the ends, from the south end?
The south end. Mhm.
So are there covered bike spaces in the units themselves?
Yes.
There'll be a dedicated spot within the unit with either a wall or a ceiling mounted, you know, like a ceiling mounted hook.
Okay, so then why the covered bike, like why the locker then?
Chris was not happy with allowing us to use the interior one, counting towards.
That's correct, I wasn't gonna count those. That's great, they went above and beyond, but I didn't count those as an official bike space.
And so
If
you're trying to
something
go
that's Class A
for-
should be enclosed with the hook. The architect is correct, I wouldn't count those towards the bicycle parking.
Okay.
The city allowed us to count them at the project across the street.
Correct.
So, okay. Well, we
Yeah,
can have our disagreements about whether we should have 2 hoops and a tree versus 1 covered spot and 1 hoop. I would vote for the tree, but I'm not the staff reviewing it. We can all have our opinions about that. But I do feel like it is a missed opportunity in an otherwise you won't have a buffer there, you know, so, and you know, you set yourself up by putting it in the rendering. So, it also is probably less than the 8-foot dimension that they require for a minimum, but you wouldn't have had to count it towards your landscape requirement anyway, right? It's not required to put the tree there for your
Correct.
interior landscaping?
Correct.
Yeah, so you could have gotten away with the 7-foot island, but, okay, I'll back down.
Commissioner Weatherby.
So how do people access these 5 units?
So the front 2 units clearly are accessed from the walkway from the sidewalk. And the other units are accessed from either walking along the driveway, or there's, a little bit of land available between the driveway and the window wells on the east side of the property. And then for the rear 2 units, then you would continue around to the back porch.
So the middle unit just kind of, they scoot down the driveway and,
Yeah, but there's a decent amount of space between their front door and the driveway. You can,
and will that be, is it paved or green or?
well, there'll
on the
be
rendering, it's hard to,
there'll be a stoop, a wood deck, and then, I don't know if you can, and then some steps down. And then as far as the actual material on grade between those steps and the driveway, I'm not sure what that's gonna be. If we go back to oops, what'd I do? How do I fix this? Do you know? Where's the full view? Do you know how to go back to full screen? Oh, it's here. Click on that. No, right there.
And you can, and I can't see that.
Oh, no, that did not do what I thought it would do. Okay, I apologize for using the full screen here.
slide you over the top.
Yeah, it's kind of small. Let me see if I can zoom in.
If you go down towards the bottom left, yes, you're good, and click on the little screen.
This one?
That's it, thank you.
Okay. But if you can see, you can see the porch, the stoop here for that middle unit. I don't know if you can see my cursor. So you can see how the front door will be in this wall. So you've got, a decent amount of space between your front door and the driveway. And you'll have your stoop and some steps down.
Yeah, I'm more concerned about how they get, because if that's a shared driveway, people coming in and out, and if they're heading down the driveway, that, if they have to walk down the driveway to get to their unit, that's what I'm concerned about.
Where are the sidewalks? How about that? Could you just show us where the
Yeah.
sidewalks are on the site?
So we had the one walkway in the front and then a path from the driveway to the back 2 units. And then, like I said, there is a strip of land along the driveway, but I do, it does get tight between the window wells and the driveway.
Commissioner Briggs.
Could you remind me, what is the required width of the driveway?
For multifamily, it's a minimum of 18 feet and a maximum of 24.
So conceivably, another variance could be asked for to reduce an 18-foot driveway is, I understand our requirements, but it seems insane.
Well, it's meant for 2-way traffic. It's
Okay.
meant for someone can come in and another person can be going out at the same time, which I think is a good thing for
Yeah,
for
right.
this.
Okay.
But you can, if you can do that with a 16-foot driveway, if people are driving slow and carefully, that might work.
Commissioner Mills.
Kind of just to follow up to that, given the discussion that we just had, from my perspective, 18 feet, it seems like a lot for a driveway. Having that as a shared internal walkway too, in my mind, makes a lot more sense. So I think that's a wise use of space.
Any other comments or questions? I do have one question in regards to building materials. I know it's been asked a couple of times, but so what is the plan for the exterior building materials exactly?
So it's the blue and gray you see on the screen is lap siding, the hardy lap siding. And then where the lighter gray or white is hardy panels. So I can show you based on the other development across the street. So here you can see the darker gray is the lap siding and the lighter gray are the panels. So it's going to be, it'll be similar materials.
Thank you. Commissioner Ackerman.
I just want to just quickly with the petitioner, is it your intention to move one of the AC units away from the, what would that be, the southeast basement well?
I think,
Egress
do you
well?
think that's a reasonable thing to offer?
I think I
Traffic?
take Commissioner Sauvé's point pretty seriously, that that's getting pretty tight as an emergency egress.
I can move it.
Okay.
What we were trying to do was to keep a clear walkway around the back of the building so that they could get to the dumpsters easily or get over to the bike locker easily. But we can look at moving the AC unit over.
Okay. I think that's something I'd pay close attention to, and should it come to City Council.
Further discussion? Are we ready for a vote? Commissioner Weatherby.
I think this, and I just want to say this because this one is a little bit difficult for me. I think I don't have a lot of things that I can vote, that I feel really strongly to vote against it. But this is not something that's like, yay. I mean, I live 2 blocks from here, and it feels very much like you're maximizing what you want, but there's not a lot for the residents or the neighborhood or the city. I mean, there's no accessible housing, there's no, like, it just feels very, I think, that very, 30-foot, you've really maxed out everything, and it just feels a little like, okay, yeah, I mean, it conforms, and I get that, but, sometimes it's nice to have a little something that feels a little less, a little more like housing in a neighborhood. And I don't object to the number of people. I would actually, in some ways, prefer less parking because I know that contributes so much to the costs and the spacing, and I know that's hard to do. But it just feels very, it's very maximized, I think, and it's a little hard to feel good about voting for this because you haven't given us a lot to say, oh, this is great. There's no green features. There's no, the outdoor space is very tucked in, and it's just, it makes it hard to really feel enthusiastic about
Right.
this.
So my one comment about that is that the developer is very driven to provide quality housing for the tenants. And, I work on a lot of student housing throughout Ann Arbor, and, what this developer is building is, granted, I'm not including the new high-rises, but as far as the things of more of a lower density, the quality inside is far superior than 98% of any of the student housing I've seen in Ann Arbor. So,
It's just that I live in this neighborhood, and when you're looking at the difference between student housing versus housing for anyone, it starts to feel like, and it is great, they look nice, they do look nice from the inside. I don't go inside, so I have to judge from the outside.
Right.
And how they affect the neighborhood and how they are for the people who live around there.
But I think you can feel good at least about the tenants are getting quality housing. And, the bedrooms are nicely sized, they're large. And, yeah, other developers might have built this same number of bedrooms, same number of units with a smaller footprint and given every student, the absolute minimum bedroom size that's allowed by building code. And it would have been, miserable housing. So I think there is, even though, granted, the neighbors and people walking by don't get the benefit of what's going on, inside, but I think as far as just benefiting the students living there, this developer is providing a much, higher quality than typical for Ann Arbor, which is, I think, a really good thing.
Further discussion? Commissioner Trudeau?
I don't have too much to say. Thanks for my fellow commissioners for asking a lot of the questions I had myself. And I'll say, I think there's things I don't like about this, and for me, what it brings up is it makes me not like R4C zoning, because I think a lot of the things that are being, like a lot of the pressures being put on this, like R4C and the way conflicting land use buffers work, kind of are dictating what we're getting, and if we don't like what we're getting, we should change the rules. And I think we all know this. It's been on our work plan for a long time. Commissioner Weatherby worked on the last task force that looked at this. So I have a hard time getting mad at somebody who's trying to provide more housing when we desperately need it, and if we don't this is not my ideal solution. But I think it meets the zoning, and it's it's on us to fix it if we don't like it.
Is there someone on this side? Did I see another hand? Commissioner Weatherby? You turned your microphone to green.
In anticipation.
Just getting ready to vote.
I'm sure.
All right. So, any further discussion? All right, all those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Oppose? It's approved. Thank you. Moving on to audience participation. This is the time for audience to address the Planning Commission. Those in the audience, you will have 3 minutes to address the Planning Commission. Please state your name for the record and your address, and you may address the Planning Commission. Seeing no one, we will move on to Commission Proposed Business. Do we have any Commission Proposed Business this evening?
It's only been 9 years.
I mean, we could get started tonight. It is kind of early for us. All right. Any other Commission Proposed Business? Do I have a motion to adjourn? Moved by Commissioner Mills, seconded by Commissioner Sauvé. All those in favor? Aye. We are adjourned. Thank you.